Got it. Fantastic. Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us this Thursday night, 2nd of September 2021. And thank you so much for those on Instagram, those on Facebook, and those on YouTube. And we're just going to go straight into it. This lovely, chilly, I must say, going to be chilly in the UK now. I think we're getting into the whole aspect of winter. We're getting down there now. So let's go straight into it. Let me introduce my fellow panelists, which is, let me start first with the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Dr. David, how are you, sir?
I'm not too bad. How are you, Guy?
Awesome. And
excellent.
you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. I'm on a bit of a break, a bit of a vacation.
Still on a vacation?
Well, not still. I'm just having a little bit more of a break.
Fantastic. We all need a break.
Spending time with the family.
We all need that. That's good therapy, David. Awesome. How are you, Sir Garry?
I'm good. It's good to see the doctor with us.
Yes. Making sure that we are unchecked and making sure our eyes are intact and everything.
Yeah. Well, I've got some assistance here.
You got some assistance. You're not going to drive to test it out. Okay, what can I say? No. And I just bring in the truth. The last shall be first and the first shall be last. So you, Sir Anthony Francis?
That's right. I'm keeping it real.
I like that. Man, the show. What can I say? Let me just put myself properly, keeping it real. But listen, guys, I must say, though, what do you think about the weather? Is there something that should change about the weather or what?
Can't you see I'm wearing a jumper?
Oh, you're wearing a jumper as well.
Nothing much for me. I'm still on vacation mode, so I'm still in a t-shirt. You know, I'm nice and warm up north. Bright sunshine. It's not been too bad.
Yes.
I think we had a high of 20 degrees up here.
Wow. And Garry, how was it down there?
In Leeds here for the past 2 days, it's been very nice, very mild. The sun is out, and it's as if we're down south. So it could be that Leeds could be where London is, and London is where Leeds is.
What did you say at the top of the show? That the first should be last and the last should be first. Is that what you said?
and you're in your space.
And I'm in my space.
well, that's great. I mean, let's get straight on it because it's interesting. I was thinking about all different things which has been going on in the news this week, and sometimes trying to find a different angle. And of course, guys, you know, we always try to find a different angle. And ladies and gentlemen, at the same time, I'd love for you to also tell us what is it that you would like to talk about. But I think the most important thing is Afghanistan seemed to be still in the mix. And I'll start off with this one, and we can always get into it. But the Taliban seem to be very upset because the American tanks and all those things that they left seem not to be working. So do you think that was a strategic move by America, or it just they can just immobilize those things from wherever they are?
No, I think the Taliban just don't know how to turn it on. Let's keep it real. I mean, look, you know, these aren't the sort of bushwhacker things they were running around in a week ago. These are serious military hardware.
Yes.
That require, you know, technical expertise to actually start the thing, let alone drive it. And they probably just can't. You know, we're not talking about, you know, you press the button on the ignition and it starts. This is the real deal. So I think what we're seeing here is just a little bit of you know, naivety that they thought they could just suddenly, you know, turn the engine on and they can put it into gear and just drive off in it.
You see, I'm worried slightly that now that they're angry, they may create more problems now because of the fact that, you know, they're mad. The thing is not working.
No, I don't think they will. I think if they were going to be angry or upset and want to do things, they'd do it irrespective of whether the machinery works or not. I do think that there's going to be an element of the machines being destabilized or put to bed before the military troops pulled out. But also think, worryingly for me, they still got the part of the hardware there. And it wouldn't take a genius, I don't think, to try and figure out how to make these parts function again, if not in exactly 100% of the fashion that it used to work in. To some degree or standard, they may well be able to turn things around. So so they still got the casing, the shells of the vehicles and such. So they may well be able to get help and assistance potentially from other countries as well. I know I'm speculating there, but potentially getting help and assistance to get these things fired up again. So it may not be as simple as just pushing a button. But I do think that once you have part of the hardware there, you just need a bit more to try and get things going again. That's the worry for me.
David, you seem a bit very optimistic that somehow that they will get this thing working and they'll be a part of the international community when it comes on to working together with the world.
Well, I'm hopeful that going forward that some of the factions will want to work successfully with parts of the world and diplomacy will reign true. That's the hope. I don't know that will be the realization. I think the two separate issues are the diplomacy that we talk about, the level of diplomacy, what happens going forward, but also just the from a military point of view. I do think that you can get things going again. If you think about, I know it's not as simple as this, but if you think about having a laptop that goes defunct, the chip might go on the board. The motherboard might need replacing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to replace the whole of the laptop itself. Yes, the laptop could be fried and you might need to start again. But I don't think that's carte blanche for the whole of the military equipment that's being left across there. That's just me speculating, but I just don't think it is. And if you can make something work again, if its function now is just 20%, you can get it to 50%. That's still better than having it at 20%. So I just think that may well materialize. Maybe it's my medical brain going. We try and salvage things. We try and get things working again as best we can. Sometimes we win and sometimes we don't win. We fail. But at the same time, I just think that's probably what's going to materialize. I just don't think it's going to be sat there as junk. Particularly if they can get finances to sort of help with that. And I'm not hopeful that they do that, but I just think it's probably going to be an eventuality.
Can I add something there? The thing I was just going to add was, if they want the world to cooperate with them, why do they want the hardware to work anyway? I mean, we're talking about military armed forces. We're talking about military hardware. If they're a different Taliban and they now want to integrate it back into the global community, then I would have thought that's the least of their priority. I would have thought they should now be focused on is diplomacy, actually meeting with world leaders, and actually trying to establish a government that can actually do business with each other. Not worrying about whether or not they can get a Tomahawk helicopter to fly. I mean, why do they need that?
That's a very interesting point, what you said, and Garry can pick up on this after in the fact that they now need to show themselves as a credible player on the world stage, and also to encourage the Afghanistan refugees who have left to say, hey guys, you really can come back, because it's not going to be a forever thing, and also to work with their immediate neighbors. What do you say, Garry?
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. The Americans hasn't left a Tesla there. Probably they wouldn't know how to drive it or to start it. I think that there's a saying that says, if I'm correct, the elephant doesn't lose its spots and the leopards or the tigers never forget. Am I
the other way around?
The elephant don't lose his chunk. What's with that?
No, I've said all of this to say this, really, that I think we're in a lot of trouble. Which conquering force, or which force that is leaving, such as the Americans or even the Russians when they left, did they leave everything intact? I doubt it. I don't think the Americans would have left things intact for the Taliban to use the things against them. Again, I mean, it's never happened in the history of warfare. Really, I've never seen it happen. I think we're in a lot of trouble, and I think the Taliban has asked for too much, or it's asking for too much. I agree totally with what Anthony has said, in that if they want to show to the world that they have changed, that their ideologies to some extent has changed, and they want to be considered a serious diplomatic players, then they've got to go about it differently. They shouldn't worry now about if the tanks are working or if the helicopters or the Black Hawks or the planes that are there are working. I think that they ought to show to those who are willing to listen, and especially, let's say, give and take the United States, they should be able to say, listen, we are a different Taliban than we were 20 years ago. We are willing to allow our females, our wives, our daughters to go to school, to be taught, to be active role players in society, and we want to show goodness, then I think that is what they ought to be doing. I mean, again, it's being said that there's $10 billion in the American banks, which the American government has frozen. Now, the best way to get on the side of the Americans and at least to show willing if they want their money, because the economy is on the brink of collapse, if it hasn't already collapsed, they need that money. They need some of it anyway. So I think that they ought to really try to win over the governments of the world, at least to see what they can do for the citizens of Afghanistan.
I think the question which is out there is: are the Taliban's really ready for the world stage? Well, they're on it now. They're on it now. I guess the question maybe is the world ready for the Taliban? Is that the right way? Is the world ready for the Taliban, or the Taliban's ready for the world stage?
I think time will tell, and I think to go back to Anthony's point about why it is that they would want to invest time, effort, in trying to get tomahawks and all the rest of it, is because they don't wholly have great control of Afghanistan itself. There's obviously warring factions. We know the history. Well, I say we know the history, but obviously part of the history is that there's warring factions within that particular part of the world, and ISSK is there, and so they want to see whether they can protect their returns that they've now obviously got in regards to Afghanistan. So they want to force those persons off, and I don't think they need military helicopters for that, but tanks and military is obviously helpful from their point of view to try and to protect that part of the world. And I'm not arguing for more war. I don't want that to occur, obviously, but I think that's probably one of their justification or points of justification in terms of wanting more military warfare. But in terms of how we sort of integrate Taliban into communication and discussions, obviously, I think that one of the first things is that we can't really condone any violence in parts of the world in terms of diplomacy. So we can't get end table and have particular issues within the country itself that aren't acted upon. I'm not saying that that you can't come to the table. I'm just saying there's some evidence to suggest that they're plusting. So the first thing, and if they can show that, then I think that that's a positive thing. And I'm hopeful. Again, I keep saying I'm hopeful that will materialize over time. So it will be really justified over time. So we can watch the space.
Yeah. There was Dominic Raab, Anthony, today being grilled, or was it yesterday being grilled as to his role in the process. I wouldn't say the historical. I guess he's just the fall guy now, isn't it? As to how he deliberated while he was on holidays. And I think there are talks now about evacuation flights will be now starting up very soon and reopening for Afghanistan. Do you think Dominic Raab is in a good place, or he's just a fall guy? Even though I think I know Anthony's response there.
Well, the majority of the Conservative leadership are all more or less incompetent. I mean, we've seen that with the Secretary of State for Health.
I was supposed to be at a Conservative thing today. Yes.
With the Secretary of State for Education. We've seen it with Dominic Raab now, who obviously can fight wars or manage them from a beach. And we've seen Boris Johnson in the early days of the pandemic, when there was 5 Cobra meetings, wasn't there. So yeah. I mean, leadership has been lacking right from the beginning. And sadly for Dominic Raab, yes, he's a fall guy, but as we've seen with Boris Johnson's government, all of these fall guys, they always tend to hang on. I mean, obviously, Gavin Williamson, the education secretary, made a complete fiasco of the children's education and the whole process of actually getting people either to take the exams earlier in the summer, and should it be teacher assessment, should it be exams, all of that. So for me, I don't really have any confidence in the government or in people like Dominic Raab, who all he's really done is simply highlighted his attention to detail, not by being on a beach when the Taliban were making their progression into Kabul. And I think what's really sad is that his incompetence has now made people in Afghanistan who legitimately potentially could have been here not be the case, because either flights weren't properly coordinated, they didn't have a proper plan. We can clearly see they didn't have a proper plan. Otherwise, they wouldn't be the chaos that we saw at the airport. So, quite frankly, I mean, the Dominic Raab is just one of many people who, when the government do their reshuffle, which they will, they'll try and move a few pieces around the chessboard. But ultimately, for me, the government haven't really showed much leadership, much planning, much strategy in terms of the real big issues that they've had since they've come to power.
I'm glad I'm your friend, Anthony. I mean,
well, it's think it, panic, do it now. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And we really recently we coined another phrase for a new book, which is now. Just do it now. Don't even think, panic, just do it now. But a point that Anthony said, and I was going to bring it up later, and I think now is the best time to talk about it, is, and I put this out there, put anybody listening, do you see the world with a definitive voice coming through? Is there a definitive voice of any clear leadership from the world? Okay, we got the UK, Boris, we got Russia, Putin, everybody's just silent. I mean, even Kim Jong-un a while ago, I don't know, he said something. You're not hearing no strong sounds. When Gorbachev was around and Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, you could hear words, you could hear sounds coming through clearly, whether you like it or not. What's your take on that? Are we lacking a void of leadership? David?
Well, I think we are.
In terms of leadership around the globe, I don't know.
Sorry.
Go on, Garry.
No, go ahead.
Go, Garry.
I submit myself to my honorable doctor.
No, I would. In terms of leadership, I we're in an interesting kind of juncture in the world. We've had interesting leadership from across in the States, and now whether we like it or not, we've now got a different leader in the United States, different direction. I think that in terms of sort of having a central voice, we don't generally have that. And whether or not we like that, I don't know that there's a sense of need of lead in that regard from a particular world. People are just trying to find that now of where they within this hierarchy of leadership. And obviously, Brexit's occurred. EU's got a particular focus. America's got a particular focus. China and Russia have still got their particular focuses. So, I think we're just seeing that pan out for the next few years. I don't think we're going to have that whole mouthpiece for the world going in a particular point of direction. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't really think it's a particular problem personally. Because obviously with that the Americas were previous, I don't know that was a particular great direction for me personally. But so that's what I'm saying. I think right now this perceived lack of leadership for the world, I don't think is a particular problem in itself, and I don't think is wholly responsible for what happened. For example, what happened in Afghanistan in regards to the fallout of what occurred there. I just think that was more down to planning and procedures more than anything else. But we probably do have a void, but that void doesn't necessarily need to be filled with the bad egg. I think it just needs a leader to naturally develop from one particular point of the world.
Garry.
From 1945 until now, there has been one voice. Let us say there's been a voice in the world that the world has gravitated to. Whenever they have spoken, the world has responded, which is, as we all probably would agree, is the United States. Now, in as much as we've had the presidents of the United States, we've had voices, as you have mentioned, Sylbourne, as Mikhail Gorbachev, as Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher. We've had George Bush Senior, and other voices within Europe, in and around the European states, like General de Gaulle, or Spain, France, Germany. You have those little voices that are there that are speaking and helping to shape world policy. But there is one voice which everybody would sit down and listen to, United States. So I think that there is a need for that, because there are checks and balances. However, up until 2 years ago, no, up until a year ago, or even 4 years back, let us say, we had one individual person who has come in and just dismantled the whole thing. And because of that, a void has come. Because up until Obama, if you remember, Obama was very popular, even though within the United States, every point, every juncture, every plan, whatever he had to say, nobody wanted to listen to him. Well, when I say nobody, the Republicans didn't want to hear a thing he had to say. And it is said that because of that, they created a monster, which was Trump. Now, the thing about it is that where we are today, I think personally that it is a bad thing, because leadership is needed. A week or so ago, last week, I believe, if I need to be corrected, we were told in the country that, or the Europeans, look at this, Europeans were asking Boris Johnson to talk to Biden.
Trump. Biden, yes.
To talk to Biden. What has Boris Johnson done, right, for the Europeans to ask him to talk to Biden? I mean,
especially after he Brexited.
Exactly. I mean, the whole thing is in shatters. I mean, there is, we do need a voice, and I think the world today is being primed. I'm a minister of religion. I'm not stepping down from that, even though I may not have my collar on. I'm not one for pomp and circumstance, But if I can interject in this program, that the world today, as far as I can see, is being primed. The world is being put into a position now where I believe they will accept anybody now to step onto the scene and to make a grand speech of how things should be never heard, and he will step in and just lead the world into a direction that, let's say, theologically speaking, would be the man of sin to some extent. But the world does need leadership. It does need, the world from time immemorial in history, the world, as countries have always gravitated to one sort of leadership or the other. And for us to be in this state right now, at this point in time, where we don't know what's going to happen, we just don't know what will take place tomorrow. We just don't know. Because if America speaks, will anybody listen? That's the whole point, If America speaks, will anybody listen? Is there anybody in Europe? If they speak, will anybody listen? NATO, the Secretary General of NATO, when he speaks, he's looking to America. He doesn't really have any sway. You've got other world leaders. Well, when I say world leaders, now I'm talking about probably of like IMF and all of these other agencies. Where are they? If you notice, they're very quiet. All of these agencies are very, very quiet. They're not saying anything. So there's a vacuum.
Good point. And let me hear what Anthony says, Mr. Truth, in an analytical way to put it together there. Because someone also said, and Anthony, someone also said, did anyone of the mentioned leaders dealt with the pandemic? And it is talking about, was there any leadership also with the pandemic? But I put it over to Anthony, please.
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly, I think what's happened here is Garry mentioned a very valid point in that Donald Trump came along and actually put across this centralist America first. Basically, it's all about us in terms of, we want to look after America. We're not really bothered about anybody else. Get on with it, etc. So, we all will know the famous picture of him at the G7 meeting where you had I think it was Angela Merkel and all the other leaders were actually sitting over a table looking down on him while he just sat there being quite smug. And I think what's happened here is, sadly, whereas before we did have real influential, dynamic leaders, I think what's now happened is we're now in a situation, sadly, where we've got sort of personality leaders. So, Biden's come in, sadly, he hasn't got much charisma. He's, and I'm not saying just because of his age, but, he's defeated Trump. He's come in, but he's not somebody who really, in a sense, sets the stage on fire. You've got Boris Johnson over here in the UK. You've got Macron. You've got Merkel, who's on her way out. So there is a clear void in terms of having a senior voice, which actually can pull together a number of these strategic strands around the world and actually say, this is the direction of travel we're going in, and this is what we should be doing. I mean, you mentioned the pandemic, and the one person who was very clear, and I thought did give some leadership, was the WHO's head, when he made it quite clear very early on about the need to have vaccinations.
Yes.
He made the point about also ensuring that the richer countries provided vaccines to the poorer countries, because I think he made the point that just because the rich countries have got their vaccines, all it needs is one individual from another country to come in, and that all goes to pot. So clearly there is a void in terms of a real clear voice that used to be there with America. And the reason why America was the main force was because they had the biggest military might. So, that's the reason why when you heard the UK was saying things like, we're going to try and get an extension to leave Afghanistan, there was no chance of that whatsoever. Boris Johnson was just talking rubbish, because once the Americans picked up their planes and said we were off and they took their toys with them, the UK had no means to go in there and support any sort of way to get them to stay. And to go back to your final point, that when you asked why was it that Boris Johnson was being asked to talk to Joe Biden, well, the simple answer to that was that the UK was hosting the G7. So what they thought they would do is use Boris Johnson as the host to talk to Biden to try and get some input. But Biden's decision was already made. I mean, we all know his position on wars anyway. He wanted to pull America out of Afghanistan. He made it clear they'd been there 20 years and that he wanted America not to be a nation that goes into other countries and stays and puts their troops in harm's way. So, I think there is a void. I think there is a need for a clear leadership. It's sad at the moment that America can't provide that, but I don't think we're going to get that from Europe, given the individuals like Macron and Merkel who are on their way out and the new people coming in.
And at the same time, you're having all these different groundswell of demonstration, which is coming up as a combination of the whole vaccine passports and all those sort of factors, which is creating a sort of crazy thing. But it does spill over now into, even in communities, and it's something that you and I, Anthony, we speak about a lot, even in communities. If we're going to say within even the Black communities, and how we are developed in as a people, you know, I'm going to juxtapose and go and talk about even like reparation movements. Not saying that I need any persons to be an author or a professional on that subject, but there's always this issue about the leadership behind it, right? The leadership with knife crime, the leadership in all different aspects. There seem to be lack of leadership in all different quarters. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I don't know if it's a fair statement. I think sadly, what you've got so many different entities now who have got their own issues they want to try and fight. That you've got different people who are obviously coming out and speaking on different topics to get their voice heard. I'll pass over to the doctor now.
David, I think we have a delay with you, David, but we can work with it. Yes. Okay, it's coming up.
Yeah, I was just saying.
You're sort of...
I think that yeah. I don't know what it is. I'm sorry. So it's essentially, I think that you know we're looking together a lot of different leadership issues at home, leadership issues on the world stage, and I think in terms of leadership issues here, we really do need to get things in home in check before thinking about the world stage. I'm not for the idea of the idea of isolationism that was kind of practiced from Trump, but at the same time, I think we've got to work with what we're doing at the moment. And I do think, in terms of the UK, we've got a lot of issues here that need to be rectified, and the leadership needs to be powerful in that regard. And I don't think it is as powerful as it should be, and for the reasons that have been articulated today. And I think that then leads itself to the world stage thereafter. So I don't know that they have to have a unified voice for the world. And I get that the United States has filled that that capacity for a long period of time because of their military and might, and maybe that has helped to diffuse certain situations that would have occurred since the 40s. But I do think that it is an interesting phase of passage that we're in. There will be a leader, I think, from a world point of view that will come out of this, that'll blossom out of this. But I do think, selfishly from a UK point of view, that leadership has been lacking somewhat. And I think that hasn't helped, particularly on the back of a pandemic, but particularly in face of Brexit.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds like we are heading towards something in the Bible which I call Revelation, looking for a leader. But I'll leave that one there anyway. Let's move away from that. And ladies and gentlemen, you can always. This is something which I'm going to cut this bit here and put it out there. In regards, I believe there were some very good points which was raised here about leadership for the world. And it could be, Anthony, guys, it could be a situation where there's a resetting, whereby we're moving away from one central voice being the policeman of the world, which is what many people didn't like at times of America, Garry. So now, whereby it is resetting now, whereby every different quarters will have their own voice, whereby one voice will not be so dominant. So it could be that. That could be a resetting at the same time. Garry, you're saying something before we move on.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to say, in relation to what the doctor says there, that we do very much, yes, need to address things at home. But anybody, anybody who has run or participated to be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, not only is to be represented at home, but he's also, throughout the years, it's pointed out that the United Kingdom has had a voice on the outside, and a very powerful and influential voice, if it's not only just based on the British Empire, where the sun never went down on it. So I think that the prime ministers of the United Kingdom, the prime ministers or the leaders of various countries around the world, or let's just say in Europe, they are not only to build confidence within the home, but they are also the representatives of of the citizens, let's say, of the country in which they lead outside. Now, it would be good to know that Boris Johnson has good leadership on the inside here at home. That I would be overjoyed to know that he has sway and influence within the United Kingdom here. But people take him for a joke here. And if people take him for a joke here, then you can imagine what he's going to sound like when he goes out there. Look when he was the foreign secretary and he stood beside several leaders. They didn't know whether they should leave him out there to talk by himself
or to fix his hair.
Because he was just a shambles out there. So if he's a shambles out there, how do you feel here at home knowing that you've got somebody out there that looks like a muppet?
Yeah.
You know, I mean.
Well,
I think what the word that's missing at the moment, sadly, with the world leaders is credibility. No one is coming across as being credible to be able to take up that mantle. So, you know, whereas before you had like a Margaret Thatcher or a Tony Blair, or you had individuals who really had stature and presence about them. Sadly, now you don't really see that in anybody. You know, we didn't see that in Trump. We don't see it in Biden. We don't see it in Boris. And as a consequence, you know, that leadership angle is gone. The only person we did have it in Europe, it was with Angela Merkel, because she was, you know, with Germany, and she came across as being somebody very competent, very credible. And so a lot of people, you know, world leaders, you know, did used to listen to what Merkel had to say. So I think there is that credibility factor, sadly, which, as Garry has mentioned, you know, if you don't have credibility, people don't take you seriously, which means that they're not going to follow.
So, Anthony, with the credibility factor that you have, I think we all have to surround ourselves and surround Garry. Not Garry. Well, Garry. Yeah, Garry. Okay, it's Garry then. I was thinking Anthony, but Garry, where it came, or Garry. But Anthony, we're talking about Mr. Truth. We need to surround Mr. Truth, and therefore the credibility leader, isn't it? Think you plan to do it now, Anthony? Why not?
Well, listen. You know, I think I've taken early retirement, so sadly that boat sailed now. So I'm more than happy to pass it on to the young doctor, who, you know, I think has got youth on his side. He's got charisma. He's got credibility. You know, and really, I think we should rally around the doctor and really give him our full support.
I'll take that, but you'll have to be my second in command, Anthony. If you're happy to take that, then let's do this together. You know, Obama needed his guy in the background there. I'm not calling you Joe Biden here. I'm calling you my strategic analyst here on the front line.
Anthony, you ran away from going to the countryside and driving the lorries. You ran away last time. I know you're running away from. You can't keep running.
You can't keep running.
Can't keep running, Anthony. Just let you know that if you're called, you're called. Yeah, many are called, and few are chosen. And to whom is called, so much is given. Is that?
Well, I'll wait until Garry anoints me with that one before.
Okay. All right. Moving on now. We're on to September Morn with the beautiful song by Neil Diamond. Of course, I would play it, but Neil Diamond hasn't given me the rights, and Facebook will shut me down. September Morn, school is back. David, they're saying schools aren't infection hubs, says public health boss. Gavin, the health secretary, is saying that, not the health secretary, the school minister is saying that back to school now. What's the latest on that area now? Because that's essential issue now.
It is. It is. Hopefully my lag has now disappeared. You can hear me now.
Yes, it's much better now. Yes.
Fantastic. So, in regards to sort of the way that COVID is facing us still, the one thing I will say is that obviously schools will all be back. We know that, and I think that what's happening now is we don't want to put schools as the foremost problem on the horizon, i.e., to be blamed for any particular increases in COVID infections going forward. Yes. I think the first and foremost thing is that we need to make sure we still strictly adhere to any advice that the government gives in regards to the vaccination program, and obviously looking at people who are at the top tier or particularly vulnerable, who may need to have a booster dose going down the line. Education has suffered tremendously, as well as other particular facets in society, like people's mental health. And what we know is that, you know, with two kind of iterations of people having to have modified GCSE A-level results, kids not being able to socialise in the same manner that they used to previously, which again will have a mental health impact on them going forward. You know, the education has suffered for these children, and we just know that we need to get back to a sense of normality for them in order to move things forward. Infectivity rates within schools, or I should say within kids, and the effect of COVID for kids, we all know as fact is not as detrimental as that in persons who are older. And so I think that we're looking at projects of testing children in environments. So I know that there's a current project with regards to Public Health England that's looking at the infectivity within school environments. So testing kids in school environments who are randomly picked up, and to see whether or not what the rates of infection are in those particular circles. And that will help educate us going forward as well in terms of the circulation within the child environment, and also the effect within the population in itself. So I agree with the head of public health. I think we've got to take a very pragmatic approach to this now going forward. Education is key. We're all afforded, to an extent, education in the Western world, and you know we know the importance of that in across the world, across the globe, because it helps for several different reasons. Not more so than helping kids develop in a normal manner. And so we need to look at that as a positive thing. We need to get kids doing the things that they would normally do. So I think the approach from Public Health England is right. I think that the approach to the pandemic now is that focus on vaccinations, making sure people, if they need to have top-up vaccinations, they have those going forward. And we look at the treatments then that can be afforded to people who need them in regards to COVID-19 and the like.
Yeah, that is correct, because I believe what the health secretary said, the educational secretary, Gavin Williams, said, it told the BBC it was right for children to have a much more normal education experience, with adults being able to go back to the pub, music festivals, and theatre. And they're talking about getting back to normality, getting back children to regular education. I know one country, Jamaica, for argument's sake, they have not been back to face-to-face school for a long time. And I think they're talking about that, but they're talking about vaccinating the children in a way to push that forward. Based on what Garry and David has said, Anthony, what's your thoughts about, because your daughter is involved in the school education. What's her feedback there from your home perspective there?
Yeah, well, my daughter, obviously, she's gone back now in terms of just doing her prep for when the students start. But you know, like many teachers, she's had to have her COVID vaccines, like many adults, in fact. So I think it's only right, if it's appropriate, that as the Education Secretary and the Health Secretary have identified, that if it's right and the individuals themselves want to take up the vaccine, that they're given the opportunity to do so. I think clearly the issue is a very sensitive one. Children want their education and they want to be in the best environment. You know, nobody wants to pay for a degree and have to do it online. So I think it's, you know, clearly they have to provide the environment that is safe for students to go back and study in. And, you know, they have to do it in the best way possible. Now, if that way is doing vaccines, fine. If it's also doing, you know, some sort of social distance, again, which didn't work as well, but maybe it doesn't need to be as severe as it was before, again, that might be fine. But I think a number of these points I would have hoped would have been identified and agreed in advance, so that they all knew, not just the ministers, but the students and the teachers knew what their plans were going to be when the individual students arrived. So there wasn't this sort of chaos that we've seen before. So I'm hoping that there is a clear plan of action. My daughter hasn't actually said to me what their preparation will be for when she goes back, but I'm hoping that there is a clear plan, clear guidelines that have been given to teachers that students will be able to follow, so that our students can get the best possible education and be in the best environment and the most safe environment for them.
Well, it seems like there's a clear need for strong leadership, which maybe is coming through. I mean, would you be happy to say that Gavin Williamson is a good pair of hands in the educational area. Anthony?
No, Gavin Williams is completely incompetent for the job. So I think what we need to happen is let's get past this phase where we are now, and then hopefully in the reshuffle, Boris Johnson will make decisions that will put in place people who. Because don't forget, one of the issues I just touched on is credibility. And Gavin Williams sadly does not have any credibility. He doesn't have any credibility with the teachers. So this is the problem. He's doing putting these measures in, but he doesn't have the confidence. He doesn't have the credibility. The very people that he's meant to be minister for don't actually believe he has the ability or the competence to do the role. And to be honest, a number of children don't even believe that. So yes, he might be putting forward these things now, but quite frankly, a little bit like the health minister and others, I think he's way, way, way out of his depth.
I must say, I'll echo what someone said earlier. I'm glad that you're on my side, Gary. I mean, Anthony.
Well, I was going to say that everybody that we have spoken of today and everyone that my learned friend Anthony has called has been totally incompetent. So I'm very glad to be on your side.
But Gary, in picking up that point there about the school and picking up from what David said, what's your take? I mean, you're in the minister there. Of course, you're speaking to without divulging, of course, your church members. What's your take on going back to school now with children?
Well, I mean, well, as you know, my wife is a past teacher, head of science in the schools that she taught.
Yes.
And my daughter, she's a teacher of mathematics, and she'll be starting a new job in September. Haven't said much, but I think that it's we're just hoping really. Well, put it this way again, I have to back up my learned friend Anthony, because my wife has had no confidence in any of the education secretaries that has ever graced the education department, especially if we can say, is it Michael Gove? I mean, I think that he made a complete hash of it in the first place. And probably this present one is just following in his footsteps, probably just a few steps behind him. But, what can we say? I mean, I think our education has been greatly affected throughout the years. Where the United Kingdom had a very high standard at one point, it's nowhere near that now. So, what can I say? I can't add anything else to what Anthony has said, and I certainly don't want him to turn to...
Don't be on the wrong side.
without risking the wrath of Anthony here, what I will say is this. Yes, we talked a little bit about leadership today, but also I think this has got to be, and I'm not saying there isn't an issue with regards to the direction and purpose of the education secretary, etc., and the lack of leadership that has been perceived here. I think that the biggest thing is that the schools are able to now put in place things to help these kids now, and try their best to not look at the hierarchy of education. And that's not an easy thing. I work obviously in the area of health, where we've had our issues in the past, and there are issues currently as well in regards to the way that health is delivered, and the things that we are able to do and the things that we're not able to do. And so I know that I can only do as much as I can as a doctor, and so teachers exactly the same thing. But the key thing is that patience for me, kids for teachers, and students for professors and assessors at university are able to get the kids and students alike into the facilities and do the work with them that's required to get them to a particular level and extent. And that's the key here. I do agree that there are issues at the top levels that need to be looked at. But even with changes of those positions, we really got to embark on that journey for the kids now, because waiting for these hierarchy to try and change things around and do certain things to get that moving now is going to be very, very difficult. So I think that's where my focus would particular line, and that's just what I wanted to say.
Well,
Just very quickly, Sylbourne, before you go, just really quick. What David just mentioned about the health situation, and what Garry mentioned about education, previous ministers. I think what's missing, sadly, is if you've noticed, there's been lots of recommendations within the health fraternity. There's been lots of reports, lots of measures, lots of recommendations they put forward from their own internal health leaders themselves to the minister. But sadly, they don't ever get implemented. It's the same with education. There's been lots of good ideas and suggestions and initiatives, but they just don't seem to get past go. I mean, I'm not going to go down into the thing around pay for the nurses, but just in general around how the departments work. They have a lot of senior individuals who do lots of research, internally, and put forward really good ideas. But sadly, none of these ideas ever seem to get to fruition and get implemented. And really, the main thing we want, as Dr. David has said, we want the environments to be safe. We want the education to be right for our children, and we simply want our societies. Garry mentioned it. Our education used to be the standard of the world. Where do we stand now in terms of education? Is America seen as better? Is Switzerland? Is France? Is the baccalaureate now seen as the standard? Where is our A levels? Where are we in the world? How do we actually stand in the world in terms of our education and our healthcare? And we used to be number one in a number of these areas, and sadly, that seems to be missing now.
And then this is piggybacking from what we discussed about the A levels recently, the GCSEs, when we're talking about the standard has maybe fallen to a certain extent. Well, let's move on and just wrap up now, guys. Thanks for that bit there, and I'm sure the conversation will continue. Those on Facebook, Instagram. I just want to close off just with this one regarding school, but we're just going to touch on it just briefly because of time. Religious groups in the UK failing children over sex report says, and what they're saying is that there's a shocking failings and blatant hypocrisy in the way major UK religious group handle child sex abuse allegations. And inquiries found. Independent inquiry into child sex abuse, IICSA, said some religious organization in England were morally failing children. And just to pick up from that bit there, I had a message from a senior social worker in the UK, and she said this to me, without this, I won't disclose her name or anything, but what she said was very damning. She said, over the 20 years that she has been a social worker, I've had one child protection case with a particular religious group. She won't mention the group there. I think what they're trying to say is that they found out a lot of them were more covering, protecting their religious group, protecting their community, than protecting the interests of the child. And it is something. So I don't know if anybody has any views on that.
Yeah, I got one real quick view, and it's a simple, and it's a one-word answer: men. If you notice, in those religious factors, all of them are headed by men. And so therefore, when there's abuse that takes place, the actual reporting is done by men. And sadly, one of the things I heard mentioned this afternoon, and obviously Garry can pick up in the last minute or so, is one of the areas, the reason why some of these things don't get brought forward is because of this need to us to say, we forgive. This was a sort of key thing that came out of the report, that they sort of factor in this thing about, okay, well, the person has committed this particular offense, but we will forgive because this is what our religion practices us to do, to forgive. But really, I think if there were more women in the leadership, which sadly there isn't, maybe there wouldn't, these issues would get addressed and they would come to the fore, and actually those organizations would be exposed. But sadly, we hear it with the Christians, we hear it within other faiths. It's been going on for a very long time, and it's very sad, and it ought to be dealt with.
Garry?
Well, I mean, I've tried my best at least to help Anthony here, and he's put me in it, hasn't he? But to be fair, he has a point. However, the Bible does say to forgive, but there are consequences to sin. there's a consequence. There has always been a consequence to the wrong that one has done. And so, um, when we steal, it's not that we must say, okay, we're sorry, but we must give back. If at all within our power, within however we ought to do, we ought to give back. If we murdered, forgive the person, but there's a consequence to the murder that had been committed. So it's not that we must forgive and forget as if it's never happened. I don't think so. Forgive them, forgive each other, whatever the sin is, but there is a consequence. Now, when it comes to men, I think when it comes to men and women, yes, we as men always seem to get all fingers pointed. What we must not forget, though, may not be, and if a proper research is done, I'm quite sure that there are some women who have done some terrible things themselves.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt, Gary, but I think this report is very clear about the religious fact that there's been a lot of abuse within these different organisations, and it has just not been reported. And I think it's the reporting that needs to be done.
Okay, and I will hold up my hands to that, because yes, across the board, in whatever religious entity that we look at over the years, we will see, and it will be found. I mean, people can go back as far as into the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, that terrible things have been done. But because of the way how things were handled back then, they were done. What happened? They were pushed under the rug. They were put behind the scenes and everything. So I don't have anything to say against what has been said. I'm just saying that yes, we do need to look at things. We do need to address and redress certain things, and we do need to handle things better.
Yeah,
we do need to handle things better. Sorry, Sir Anthony Francis. I'm very sorry. I hope I'm not being incompetent, sir.
And David, in wrapping up on that.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show that you can have leadership, but leadership can be good and leadership can be bad. I think in this instance, it would have been more effective to not have any leadership whatsoever, and then have the fallout of the investigations then leading to people fairly having their due course of process, but having that course nonetheless, than not having it at all, and then having these people go through what they've gone through for many a year. So it does feed back into that leadership debate that we talked about earlier. This leadership that was enforced in this particular arena, where there seems to have been that cover-up, was not the best for those poor victims that went through what they went through. And I just hope that, obviously, going forward, these kind of deplorable acts will not be repeated again.
Yeah. Well, I'll wrap up now, but just to say that it's so funny that this report came out, because in Jamaica there is something which is going on now with some discussions about a particular artist, and people are saying he's abusing whatever. I won't go call in a name, but it's so interesting that they were saying that a lot of people within the church was covering it, women were covering it at the same time. So it's very interesting how it came out here. And it's happening in Jamaica, as we can say very clearly and confidently that child abuse, pedophilia is worldwide. It's not just relegated to the UK or Jamaica or anywhere in the world. But on this final note, guys, we can wrap up. I want to say have a good weekend. And Gary, I just want to say, pass this message on to Renee. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to Renee.
I didn't want to take her picture because she was like, oh, but just wish her happy birthday for us as well. And I took a break over the weekend. I went to in Sussex. I was looking for Prince Harry and Meghan, but they escapade. They weren't around. Taking this holiday. So I hope people really do take this time and really chill, especially for Jamaica. Really take time and enjoy nature, because Jamaica is going through a lockdown as well. Of course, I talk about Jamaica a lot, Anthony, because I'm biased. You know what I mean? Because Anthony. Anyway, Anthony, why are we calling your name so much today? I think you make us very nervous today, Anthony. We all don't want to be on your good boots.
No, we don't want to be. I don't want to be called incompetent, so I better keep quiet.
Okay. All right, guys. I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, those on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, thank you so much for coming on. Let's have this conversation going. I'm going to actually try to cut up the shows in certain areas, especially the leadership bit, to have more conversation on that. I think that is a crucial one. So have a good night. Garry, all the best. David, enjoy the rest of your break. And David, it's interesting that people are having a go at the Dominic Raab having his break on the beach. You were as well. Anyway.
Well, I've got a competent bunch of juniors and staff to look after the department whilst I'm away, so I can put my trust and faith into them. And if there was a problem, I'll be back in the beck and call.
Competent. I like that word. Competent. Anthony, I'm going to let you have the last word before I shut down. Say your piece, Anthony.
Thank you. Good night, and I'll see you next week.
I like that. Man, let's shut it down. See you guys. Have a good night.